Are you ready for phenomenal thought leadership from the most well-respected leaders in industry? Join us for stellar conversations and sound advice from trailblazers who have a passion for excellence. Learn best practices that will catapult the culture of your company into a new level of greatness. Welcome to Great Companies, Great Leaders. Your host is Christine Gannon. Hello, welcome to Great Companies, Great Leaders. I'm your host, Christine Gannon, the CEO of Brightworks Consulting. As you know, Brightworks is a full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company, and we provide the latest research and best practices, as well as solutions for organizations who are really trying to solve for all the issues we find ourselves in the workplace with today. So these are solutions for companies who maybe you're not sure where to start, or you've started, but you're not sure where to focus your efforts. And part of our mission is to ensure that we provide the latest point of view from leaders across industry and across the country. And one way we do that is with that podcast. So today, I'm just so incredibly honored to welcome Donato Tramuto, who's the founder and chairman of Health eVillages. Donato, welcome.
Thank you, Christine, and my thanks for you hosting this today.
Absolutely. Donato is also the founder and chairman of the Tramuto Foundation. He's also an author, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and a healthcare activist. His full bio will be in the podcast link, but a little bit about this tremendous leader. Donato is the former CEO of Tivity Health and is widely recognized for his commitment to social change and transformational leadership in healthcare innovation that led the New York Times to deem him a global health activist. Donato is also the founder and chair of the Tramuto Foundation, which advances young people's rights to education and healthcare access and combats human rights violations. He launched the foundation in memory of his two friends and their 3-year-old son, who lost their lives on 9/11 when United Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. Tramuto was scheduled to be on that flight. However, and due to a toothache, he never boarded the plane. Since the launch of the foundation, over 100 young adults have received a Tramuto Foundation Scholarship to pursue their dream of a college education. His 3-decade commitment to social change and innovation has earned numerous awards, including the prestigious Robert F. Kennedy Ripple of Hope and the RFK Embracing His Legacy Award. Tramuto currently serves as a member of the board of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights and is chairman of its Leadership Council. A proponent of lifelong learning, Tramuto holds honorary doctorates from the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, Thomas Jefferson University, LaSalle College, and St. Joseph's College. He's also the author of Life's Bulldozer Moments: How Adversity Leads to Success in Life and Business, and most recently published The Double Bottom Line: How Compassionate Leaders Captivate Hearts and Deliver Results. It's so great to have you here today. We could probably do a podcast for 3 hours and not cover everything. But before we jump into your book and some of the accomplishments, there's so much to your bio that I really couldn't capture in the intro. But I'd really love to start with you sharing a little bit about your journey that's propelled you to your success as a leader across so many fronts.
Well, thank you for starting with that question, because it has been my mantra in life that nobody cares what you do until they know why you do it. And I am a product of having lost most of my hearing at age 8. And for nearly 10 years, had little to no hearing. I was bullied. I failed the 5th grade. That was perhaps challenging for most young children. For me, it was double challenging because I had a twin brother who was able to advance forward, and the ridicule and being made fun of by classmates and, quite frankly, family members really taught me in those years where I was bullied and denied the right to be heard. I entered into an intellectual curiosity that was fueled by the writings of Robert Kennedy and Dr. King. While I couldn't hear their words to the degree that most young children would be able to, I read their books and I sensed their transformational persona. And it really is what has carried me through my life. And I made a commitment during the years when I could not hear, that if I did have my hearing restored, which at age 17, my fifth surgery was able to bring back about 50% in my right ear. I don't have any hearing in my left ear today, but at that time, about 60% had been restored, that I would devote my professional life to healthcare and helping others receive healthcare and have access to healthcare. And so that's really the story that has driven my professional why. You explained my personal why, which was the loss of my friends on 9/11. I do believe that we are not segmented creatures, we are dynamic. And so we have a professional and a personal why. And you now have heard what those two whys are.
It's a tremendous path you've taken, really, and so much impact when I think about the different roles and the different opportunities that you've had. You started a foundation and the work that you've done in the foundation, all working, as you said, to serve the planet and the people of the planet on so many levels. And many of the experiences that you've had, really, it sounds like led you to write your most recent published book, The Double Bottom Line: How Compassionate Leaders Captivate Hearts and Deliver Results, which, by the way, is available on Amazon. But let's talk about the book and really what inspired the content. You've alluded to it a little bit, but let's go deeper.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because one very significant, I'll get to why I wrote the book in a minute, but one significant validation for me, when we were interviewing the 40 plus leaders for the book, and we came up with the definition for compassionate leadership, which is in essence empathy in action. I was very pleased to look back at my life and to really acknowledge that nearly 95% of the time I did that. I saw something that was wrong, I listened, and I did something. And so the reason why I wrote the book is that over the years as a CEO and as a C-suite executive, I still saw too much of the old face of leadership in organizations, not just with CEOs, but with board members as well. And this is a top-down, hierarchical, the boss has all the answers type of leadership that focuses more on productivity and profit than people. And quite frankly, that doesn't work anymore. You know, Christine, you hear the term the Great Resignation. Well, I have a different term. I think it should be called the Great Reflection. It is the cause for the Great Resignation, is that people are reflecting on their lives. Today's workforce is too young, too diverse, too disengaged, and too tired of not being heard and respected. And so I wanted to end this myth and this accusation that many of my colleagues, quite frankly, said about me when I said I am practicing compassionate leadership. They would come back and say, that's weak leadership. I wouldn't carry that banner. And so this gave me an opportunity. I stepped down deliberately as CEO of Tivity Health. I had been in the process of planning for that for months. And my board expedited it, but I had been in the process of organizing how to step down to write this book. And that's the reason why I wrote it.
So who do you think would benefit the most from your book and the content?
That is a great question. And by the way, it's not just for business leaders. Look at our world today. Every issue that we are trying to address, we have the highest rate of suicide right now, which is stemming out of loneliness and social isolation. There's a great portion of our population that can't put $400 together for an emergency fund.
Right.
We have social unrest, political unrest, family unrest. This book is not just for CEOs. I think anyone who's wanting to understand how they can address the discourse that is in our society today will benefit from the book.
I agree. And having read it before we jumped on this podcast, I would agree with you. And I was thinking about it from a parenting standpoint. Really, parents have such an opportunity. So much is happening in our school system across the country. I think it could be confusing for children at any age. It could be confusing. And I think the element of empathy and compassion could get lost and wrapped up in the social unrest and social issues that are in the forefront.
I think you're right. And I think what the book does is, listen, I have heard a lot of people say, hey, I'm empathetic, and that's not enough.
It's not.
That is not enough. You have to take it to the next level. And I think that's what has been very revealing in terms of the folks that have read the book have left and said, oh my gosh, I now get it. I'll give you a great example of a executive leader during the pandemic. I did a lot of coaching and counseling while writing the book. And there was this one executive who said to me, I need your help. I was on this Zoom call and I wanted to follow up on the purchase order. And the other executive from the company had mentioned that his wife had COVID, as did his children. And I said, oh, I feel bad. By the way, when does the purchase order come in? And I said, oh my gosh, that's the wrong thing. You might have wanted to just postpone that purchase order. And it was almost revealing. By the way, Harvard had a great research a few years ago. 80% of leaders want to be compassionate, but they don't know how. And there's a great example of this executive. He didn't know that he could get involved in a conversation about this person's personal life. In fact, he would have probably have gotten the purchase order. The conclusion, he never ever received the purchase order. And so there is, I think, what I call a trust decay in our society. And the book really, is about helping to regain that trust with family. I don't know whether you saw the 60-minute program on Sunday about the mental health challenges among our young people. It is very, very sad because there has been this collision of so many forces
Right.
in our society. And then you throw the pandemic on top of it. I think that this book, hopefully, its time has come. I'm not surprised, quite frankly, that it's taken off, because I think that today I was watching Good Morning America. They were interviewing a person many years ago who was in a movie, and she talked about compassion and empathy. Gosh, I mean, this seems to be the topic du jour.
I'm going back to a comment you made a few minutes ago related to the board and the opportunity for the board to be transformed with compassion and empathy as well. Do you think there's a significant opportunity there?
I do. And, I'll give, quite frankly, an example that happened, to me, that really didn't reflect compassion. And that was, before I was planning to step down, we were working on a retirement agreement. And then all of a sudden, the board, I don't know what happened, but, 3 days after that, when we were near our agreement, came in and said, we want you to step down right away. And, there was an acquisition that we had made. It wasn't, unfolding very, very well. And it just needed more time. But there is a great example of how the board did not demonstrate compassion. And 4 weeks later, COVID kicked in, and that particular division started to take off. And so I do think that this has to start with the board. And we have to get past this, belief that you're not a board member unless you are, in your 50s or 60s. We have to invite the young people who have a greater sense of what's happening in the marketplace. And we shouldn't have board members that are on for 20 years. I think that we should have term limits. And I think that the board should start with the boardroom on how they practice compassion so that it becomes a cultural norm in the organization. A CEO cannot do it all by themselves.
No, I agree. The other element of the board that's interesting, we've been doing work in this space over the last year, really encouraging organizations to think outside of board members coming on that are focused on the financials. The element of HR and the element of human capital management and the element of compassionate leadership that often, we have leaders in HR who potentially aren't being groomed or looked at for their participation on a board. And we often have leaders in middle management who could be groomed, as you said, in terms of preparing them for a board seat. So I think there's tremendous opportunity.
There's a new study that was released this morning by IBM. They basically surveyed 3,000 CEOs, more than 50% talk about, leadership sustainability, how important it's going to be.
Right.
Really, and the only way, by the way, we break this down in the book, but the average age of a CEO right now is 59 years old. By the way, that's the same age for those who are in Washington. Yet we have 5 generations in the workforce.
Right.
The Gen Zers and the millennials are going to dominate greater than 60%, but we have 50. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I made the decision. You'll enjoy this story. I remember the chairman of the board that I was, the CEO of, when I said, I think I want to step down. I was 63 years old. And he said, you're going to have a hard time finding a job at 60. I said, I'm not going to be looking for another CEO job.
Right.
I am stepping down because I think it's important to bring a young, and by the way, we brought a 41-year-old, leader to replace me. And I thought that was terrific. And so we have to start thinking differently because the young,
Yes.
that's why I call it the great reflection. They are reflecting on their lives. And it's not about just more pay.
Yes.
It's about us saying they're lazy or they don't want to do what you and I did.
Right.
No, they are reflecting on their lives. They want more out of their work than just a paycheck.
Absolutely. Which leads me to my next question and comment, because there's research around that in terms of talent leaving the workforce. And as a leader in the DE&I space, we know specifically that culture drives a lot of what happens in the workplace, and it's a deciding factor. We have talent leaving the environment if the culture is not inclusive and equitable. So our work, with clients is really helping them with those pathways so they can recruit talent, retain talent, ensure the culture supports an environment where people can thrive. So when we think about leaders today and we think about the great reflection, what role do you think compassionate leadership plays in today's environment?
It plays a major role. And let me tell you why. We introduce this in the book. We call it the 3 T's. Because, by the way, I don't want any of the listeners to pick up that, okay, compassionate leadership is just being nice. No, nice means you're being pleasant. You have a smile on your face. You may walk down the hall and ask, how are you? Compassionate leadership is getting to know the people in that organization. And the only way you get to know them is if you practice the 3 T's that we associate to listening. And that is to start off with tenderness, to listen to their stories. Everyone has a story. By listening to their story and understanding their needs, you gain the trust. And then you can be tenacious. That's the 3 T's: tenderness, trust, and then tenacious. What happens is most leaders start with the 3rd T. And then they go around with a pooper scooper because they don't have the trust.
Right.
We got to get trust back in the organization. And you don't get trust back by having your focus on the culture first. That's why I say culture doesn't come first anymore.
Right.
Trust comes first.
Right.
So the great reflection is, listen, I'll give you a great story. My niece recently was applying for an HR coordinator job, and she examined where and what that job entailed. And she said to herself, this doesn't demand me being in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So they loved her. She beat out every candidate. They go to offer her the job, and hats off to her. She said to them, I will only take the job if you allow me to work from wherever I want to work. Hats off to the HR person who presented the job. She said, you're the first person to be transparent with me, and you are right. Although this has a location, we're going to remove that. That's the type of trust that you will gain by being tender first. And so,
Right.
My niece, by the way, is not taking the job. She's going to be working for us this summer. But, it was a great example of transparency has to be in the organization. And it can only be there if you start off with tenderness. If you start off with toughness, you will not get a person to be transparent with you.
Really comes back to knowing people, listening to people, caring, right? The care element. And you said it earlier in terms of having compassion and empathy often in my early corporate days was very much viewed as weak and very much not appreciated, right? So my peers didn't appreciate any kind of compassion or empathy. Show me what the numbers are.
By the way, if you take my niece as an example, When I was starting off the workforce, you know what my parents would have said to me? You don't have that discussion. You just go where they want you to go. And so
Right.
that generation has really changed.
Yes.
Mark Twain said it well, and I want to compliment you because you asked me from the beginning about my why, not my what. Mark Twain once said, quote, "The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why." We have to get to the whys of people. It's why we have such a high degree of loneliness today. It's why we have a high degree of lost sense of relevancy. We're on our devices. Nobody's listening to understand. They're listening to react.
Right.
That's the change that I propose in my book, is to put your devices down, listen to understand,
Right.
take notes, send a thank you card. Maya Angelou said it very well. People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Never more true. Never more true. So Donato, in closing, phenomenal information you've shared. Thank you so much. And thank you just for sharing from the heart in terms of your experiences, your journey, super relevant, super impactful. How can people find you and where can they get your book besides Amazon?
Well, thank you for asking that question. We don't see this as a book, we see this as a movement. And so if they go to, donatotramuto.com, they will certainly get all the information around this compassionate leadership movement.
Okay, my very last question relates to the picture on the wall, one of my tremendous heroes. Talk to me about that picture.
Oh, President John Kennedy. Well, he was also my hero, and talk about a transformative leader. That picture has a lot of meaning. I actually had won it at one of the RFK events where it was in a live auction, but they explained to me the story behind the picture. President Kennedy's mother, Rose, always taught her children that when you are out and about and a photographer wants to take a picture of you, remember that that photographer is trying to earn a living. Stop and look at the camera. And President Kennedy, this is President Kennedy in Paris, and exactly what he did, he stopped and looked at the camera.
Phenomenal.
And it's a Harry Benson photograph, and so it's obviously a great reflection of what we're talking about. Take time and show the person you care.
Absolutely. And for those of you just listening, you're going to have to jump on the video to see the photo because it's absolutely phenomenal and just powerful. So Donato, congrats on your new book published. Congrats on the book tour, all that you're doing with the foundation. So grateful to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you for everything you're doing to really help leaders. I do believe leaders want to be better and do better. And we just need to help them get there.
Absolutely. Will you come back?
I just want to mention that 100% of the book proceeds go to 7 organizations whose work is geared towards a more compassionate environment. So keep that in mind.
Can they find those organizations on your website?
They most certainly can. Yep.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Christine.
Brightworks Consulting hosts this podcast and YouTube channel to spotlight the leadership around the world that is changing lives. Brightworks offers a myriad of consulting services in the public and private sector, to include diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions for any size company. You can find us at www.brightworksconsulting.com. We're honored to have Best Companies AZ as a presenting sponsor for this podcast. Best Companies AZ is your #1 source for regional employer branding. You can find them at www.bestcompaniesaz.com.